Out in the cold silence of space, where nothing should survive, a veteran pilot stumbles upon three young dragons drifting helplessly between the rocks of the asteroid belt. Creatures not meant to live, yet fighting for every breath. Saving them means breaking every rule, risking his career, and stepping into a future he never imagined. But sometimes, the smallest sparks ignite the greatest adventures. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's jump into the story. Captain Arden Hale had flown the same path through the asteroid belt for decades. The cargo ship Wayfarer was old, its panels worn from years of travel, but it remained steady under his hands. Space was cold, silent, and predictable most days. Arden thought he had seen everything. Rocks drifting like frozen rivers, abandoned mining stations that hung in the dark, flickers of light from patrol ships rushing to jobs more important than his. But nothing had prepared him for the three sparks that appeared one quiet watch. They came out of the dust clouds suddenly, glowing wings beating against the emptiness. At first, Arden thought it was debris catching sunlight, but then he saw them twist and flap with life. Three small creatures, their scales flashing green, copper, and bronze gold. They were young, maybe no larger than earth dogs, and they were struggling. Each carried a thin bubble of atmosphere around its body, fragile as glass, and the bubbles were already failing. "Piper," Arden said to the ship's AI. His voice stayed calm, but his heart pressed harder in his chest. "Confirm visual." The AI's tone was cheerful, almost playful. Three juveniles detected. Classification, Draco Australis. Warning: bioatmospheric fields unstable. Collapse in 4 minutes. Arden knew the name from old reports. Space dragons. Rare creatures that had learned to survive among the colonies and debris fields. Adults could hold their air bubbles for days. Young ones could barely last for minutes. These three would not survive much longer. He gripped the controls, his weathered hands moving with instinct. He had always been a careful pilot, cautious to the point of boredom. But this was different. Compassion was stronger than caution. He spun the Wayfarer on its axis, thrusters glowing blue, lining up the cargo bay doors with the flight path of the creatures. The ship shuddered as it turned, but Arden did not hesitate. His mind whispered of fines, suspensions, and the Interspecies Bureau rules. But his heart whispered louder. Lives mattered more. The hatch yawned open, spilling warm fog into the vacuum. The young dragons flapped harder, weak wings cutting through nothing. One faltered, then the others followed. Arden tilted the ship gently, pulling them into the slipstream. Like sparks drawn to a flame, they tumbled into the cargo bay. The door sealed with a heavy clang, and the hiss of atmosphere returned. Arden unbuckled and hurried down the ladder. When he entered the bay, he found them huddled in the corner. The green one, a female, pulled herself tall, wings folded tight but ready to spread if needed. She stood between Arden and the others, her amber eyes bright with fear and courage. Behind her crouched the copper male, restless and curious, and the smallest, a bronze-gold runt, watched with a stillness that felt too knowing for his age. Arden moved slowly, Hands open, voice soft. Easy there. No harm meant. He reached the emergency locker and pulled a protein pack. It was nothing more than paste, but food was food. He squeezed a line of it onto the floor and stepped back. The copper male sniffed, then crept forward. The female rumbled, a warning sound, but she did not stop him. He licked the paste, then licked again. Hunger, winning over fear. Soon the other two joined, even the runt, careful and deliberate. The ship's AI spoke again. "Captain, unauthorized collection of fauna is punishable by—" "Quiet, Piper," Arden said firmly. "Sometimes law waits. Sometimes hearts move first." He watched the creatures eat, his chest loosening. "You need names," he murmured. "Green Protector, let's call you Fern. Bright Spark, you're Kiln. And you, Small Star, you'll be Glint." They ate until their bellies settled, then curled together in the corner. Fern kept her eyes on him, unblinking. Kiln twitched his tail with restless energy. Glint found a coil of cargo netting and tucked himself into it like it was home. Arden adjusted the grow lights from his hydroponic shelf, turning them into makeshift heat lamps. Warmth spilled across the bay, and the dragons relaxed further. It was a small thing, but in space, small comforts could mean survival. Fern stretched one wing. Kiln sighed like a tired child. Glint simply watched. Still and thoughtful. But, Piper," Arden said, "scan the debris field for signals." The pause was short. "Negative. No distress beacons. Wreckage composition matches unregistered habitat. No official records." Arden's jaw tightened. He had heard of such things. Illegal breeders raising dragons for their scales, selling them to black markets. When accidents happened, no one claimed the wreckage. No one cared for the young left behind, until now. He leaned on the railing, his breath steady but heavy. Outside, the asteroid belt kept circling, endless and cold. Inside, 3 young lives warmed a corner of his old ship. He had rescued them, but the questions had only begun. What to do with them, where to take them, how to protect them from a universe that saw profit instead of life. Arden spoke softly, more to himself than to them. "Stay close. We'll figure it out." Fern tilted her head as if she understood. Kiln's tail tapped the floor. Glint blinked once, slow and thoughtful. The hook of their story. Captain Arden Hale, veteran pilot, had broken the rules for 3 small sparks in the belt. The suspense now lay in the price he would pay and the path that lay ahead. The next morning began like any other on the Wayfarer. The old cargo ship hummed with steady power, its engines pushing through the silent belt. But inside the bay, nothing was ordinary. 3 young dragons had made a corner of the ship their home. Fern, the emerald female, never let her guard down. Kiln, the copper male, was curious about every sound and shadow. Glint, the small bronze gold runt, seemed to study everything with thoughtful eyes. Captain Arden Hale stood by the doorway, watching them breathe in the recycled air. And he wondered what price he had just chosen to pay. The comm light flashed red. Arden knew who it would be before he even pressed the button. Owen Coldridge, the corporate dispatcher, appeared on the small screen. His face was pale, thin, and impatient. "Hale," he said sharply. "Your route shows a delay. Your cargo is behind schedule. Explain." Arden took a slow breath. encountered juveniles in distress. 3 dragons. I pulled them into the bay before their airfields failed." "You what?" Coldridge snapped. "You're moving unauthorized fauna on a corporate vessel? Do you have any idea the fines involved? You will drop them at the next station, or you will lose this run. You are 2 years from pension. Think carefully." Arden met the man's eyes through the grainy screen. "I didn't have a choice," he said simply. Coldridge ended the call without another word. The silence after was heavier than the belt itself. Messages began to trickle in from the public network. One dealer from Vesta offered credits for the copper male. Another promised high value for the emerald female as breeding stock. A researcher from a lab spoke of medical care and proper enclosures. Words that sounded gentle but meant cages. Each message made Arden's chest grow tighter. To them, the dragons were property, not lives. He deleted the offers one by one, his jaw clenched. Still, he tried the official path. "Interspecies Care Bureau," answered a tired voice. The officer introduced himself as Lieutenant Pavel Rios. "State your case." 3 juveniles, Arden said. "Found them abandoned in Sector 779. They need placement now." "Juveniles," Rios repeated, the tone shifting from boredom to regret. "Captain, our shelters are overfilled. We can log them, but you're looking at months before a spot opens." "They don't have months," Arden said. "Their home was destroyed. They need safety." "I wish it was different," Rios replied quietly, "but that is the reality." Arden ended the call with his fists tight against the console. Fern rumbled low in the bay, as if she sensed the weight on his shoulders. Kiln nudged a broken tool toward him, tail wagging as though trying to cheer him. Glint tilted his head and blinked slowly, silent but steady. The alarm tone broke the heavy moment. "Incoming vessels," Piper, the AI, reported. 2 skiffs. Trajectory indicates pursuit pattern. The map lit with red arcs. Pirates, drifting near a cluster of rocks, waiting for prey. Fern growled, her eyes flashing. Arden gripped the controls. "Hang on," he muttered. The Wayfarer dove into the thickest part of the asteroid field. Rocks spun past, their shadows sliding across the hull. The skiffs tried to follow, but Arden had flown this belt since before some of their pilots were born. He worked the ship like a blade through cloth, threading gaps so narrow the shields hissed. The raiders gave up, their signals fading into the distance. Fern's growl softened to a steady hum. She turned her head toward Arden when he returned to the bay, and this time she let him touch her brow. It was the first sign of trust. Kiln pressed against his leg with childlike affection. Glint climbed onto a crate, staring as though memorizing the moves that had saved them. When they reached Ceres station, Arden carried the weight of more than cargo. Miriam Oakes, an older woman with weathered hands, greeted him at the rescue shelter she ran. The room smelled of hay and cleaning agents. Cages lined the walls, each holding a creature from one world or another. Miriam studied the 3 dragons carefully. "You've done well keeping them alive," she said, "but they need more than luck." "Can you take them?" Arden asked. "I could take 1, maybe 2, she answered, her voice heavy with honesty. "But they're tied together. Separate Kiln and Glint, and they'll pine until they fade. Take Fern away, and the boys will lose their protector. I've seen it happen too many times." Arden looked at the trio. Kiln pressed close to Glint, tails entwined. Fern stood tall, her wings tense, her eyes fixed on him as though daring him to make the wrong choice. His throat closed. "I can't split them," he whispered. "Then don't," Miriam said gently. "But know this, every choice has a cost." That night, back on the Wayfarer, a new message arrived. It was not a warning. It was a termination notice. Coldridge's voice came through cold and final. "Remove the animals or lose your contract. You have 24 hours. Arden sat in the cockpit, the glow of Jupiter faint on the horizon, and felt the weight of his years. 2 years from retirement, 2 years from rest, and now it could all vanish. Yet when he glanced into the cargo bay, he saw Kiln curled against Glint, the two of them safe in their shared nest, while Fern stood guard with quiet strength. The sight answered the question before he even asked it. "Piper," he said, voice steady, "calculate fuel for Europa, and scan for any jobs near the domes. We'll need work where hearts matter more than rules." The AI hesitated, then replied, "Calculating. Possible contact. Captain Dina Rook, Europa Settlement. Flexible contracts. Tolerance for unusual crew." Arden almost smiled. "Good, we'll need that tolerance." In the corner of the bay, Fern stretched one wing. Kiln chirped softly. Glint blinked once, calm and thoughtful. Arden knew what they were telling him without words. They would not leave him, and he would not leave them. His soft heart had already chosen, and whatever cost came next, he would bear it. The Wayfarer drifted quietly between the rocks of the belt, its engines beating like a tired heart. Captain Arden Hale sat at the small table in the galley, a blank sheet of cargo logs glowing on the screen. His hands hovered over the keys, but no words came. How do you write down that you had chosen lives over credits and compassion over contract? There was no box for that in company records. In the cargo bay, Fern, Kiln, and Glint played in the warmth of the grow lamps. Kiln tumbled with restless energy, chasing his copper tail. Glint stacked loose bolts into patterns only he understood. Fern remained near the door, her amber eyes scanning every corner, a silent guardian. Arden watched them on the monitor, his chest heavy, but also strangely light. He had been alone so long. Now he was not. That truth mattered more than the silence of the logs. The calm buzzed. Owen Coldridge's face filled the small screen, hard and cold as ever. "Hale," he said, "this is your final warning. Surrender the dragons at your next stop, or lose your license. Your pension will be gone. You'll never work a company run again. You are 2 years away from security. Don't throw it away." Arden's voice was steady. "I've spent 40 years keeping contracts. This time, I'm keeping something else." Coldridge narrowed his eyes, then cut the line. The screen went black, but the words lingered like smoke. Hours later, a softer message arrived. It was Miriam Oakes, the woman from the Ceres shelter. Her voice carried the weight of years, but also kindness. "Captain Hale, I asked around after you left. There's a rescue ranch on Titan. They have land, open skies, and care for bonded pairs. They're willing to take Kiln and Glint together. I could keep Fern here until another place opens. It may not be perfect, but it's better than cages." Arden leaned back, his throat tight. He pictured Kiln and Glint bounding across wide fields, safe and together. He pictured Fern standing alone in a crowded shelter, her watchful eyes dulled by loss. He tried to force the thought into a plan, but his mind refused. He whispered, "Thank you, Miriam. I'll think about it." That night, he tested the idea. In the bay, he built a barrier of cargo crates, placing Kiln and Glint on one side and Fern on the other. The reaction was immediate. Kiln cried out, high and sharp, pressing his small body against the wall. Glint clawed at the barrier with desperate focus. Fern threw herself forward, her wings spread, her growl fierce, not with anger, but with grief. Arden dropped the crates at once, heart pounding. The three rushed together, wings wrapping tight, their relief as clear as words. The bond was unbreakable. Arden sat on the floor, his hands shaking. "I can't do it," he said aloud. "I won't separate you." Fern looked at him with calm certainty, as though she had known his answer all along. Kiln pressed against his boots. Glint climbed onto his knee and blinked slowly. His small eyes filled with trust. The calm blinked again. Another message from Coldridge. This time, colder than ever. "Effective immediately, your contract is terminated. Your license will be revoked if you continue to harbor unauthorized animals. Remove them within 24 hours or lose everything." Arden read the words and let them settle. 40 years of service, gone with a single notice. The line he would not cross was behind him now. He had chosen, and there was no way back. He turned to the AI. "Piper, calculate fuel for Europa. Check job boards under local settlement listings. Find anything that'll take us?" The AI hesitated, then answered in its usual bright tone. "Fuel reserves sufficient for one long trip. Possible opportunities in Europa Dome." Captain Dina Rook posted for flexible pilots. Note, tolerance for unconventional crews. Arden almost laughed, the sound half relief, half exhaustion. "Unconventional crew," he repeated. "That's us." The next days became a new rhythm. Arden stripped non-essential systems from the ship. The hydroponics rack, the backup nav array, even old panels that could be sold. Kiln followed him everywhere, chirping and tugging at tools. Glint watched carefully, then began handing him the right wrench at the right time. Fern kept her place near the door, steady and sure, as if guarding their small family from the universe beyond. At night, Arden sat in the bay while the dragons settled. Kiln curled up at his boots. Glint leaned on his side, quiet and warm. Fern opened one wing, sheltering all of them in a pocket of emerald scales. Arden had flown alone for decades, telling himself it was simpler, safer, cleaner. But now he understood. Freedom had never been silence. Freedom was connection. Freedom was trust. On the 5th day, Europa appeared ahead, a pearl of ice with Jupiter burning behind it like a living sun. The sight pulled something loose in Arden's chest. A new world, a new path, a chance to begin again. He had lost his pension, his license, and his contract, but he had gained 3 lives that trusted him without question. That was a trade he would make every time. As the Wayfarer adjusted its course, Arden looked at the trio. "We're almost there," he said softly. Fern blinked. Kiln chirped. Glint tapped his tail in rhythm. It was not words, but it was enough. They understood. They were together. and Arden had crossed the line he would never return from. The line between duty and heart. Europa rose before them like a frozen pearl, its cracked ice plains glowing under the distant light of Jupiter. Captain Arden Hale guided the wayfarer down with practiced care, but this time his heart felt lighter. For the first time in years, he was not just arriving at another station to unload freight. He was arriving with family. Fern, Kiln, and Glint crowded near the bay window, their eyes wide at the sight of the glowing horizon. The copper light of Jupiter caught their scales, turning them into jewels against the dark. At the dock, Captain Dina Rook met him with a steady handshake and sharper eyes. She looked at the three dragons without surprise. "So this is your unusual crew," she said. "Good eyes, good instincts. They'll fit in here." Her words carried no judgment, only welcome. It was exactly what Arden needed to hear. Life on Europa was rough but honest. Arden took small contracts, carrying parts to ice drilling stations and food to survey domes. The pay was low, but the freedom was high. No one asked for manifests of his passengers. No one cared that three dragons shared his cargo bay. They worked together, not as cargo, but as partners. Kiln followed children through the settlement, playing gentle games and letting them tug his tail. Glint scratched shapes into scrap metal, his artwork soon hanging in markets and homes. Fern took up the role of silent protector, her sharp senses warning the community of ice shifts before the alarm sounded. The trio were no longer strangers. They were part of a larger family now. Settlers smiled when they walked by, and children ran to greet them. Arden had been a loner most of his life, but he found himself welcomed because of the very companions he had once been told to abandon. Weeks later, a message reached him from Lieutenant Pavel Rios of the Interspecies Care Bureau. The tired voice Arden remembered was gone, replaced by something steadier. "Captain Hale," Rios said, "we've been watching what you and your dragons have done on Europa. They're not cargo. They're partners. We want to make it official. A mobile rescue unit. You keep your ship, you keep your hours. When calls come in for stranded life, you go. Fern, Kiln, and Glint will be listed as recognized partners." Arden listened carefully, his hand resting on the console. He turned to look at the trio. Kiln tilted his head, chirping as if ready for a new game. Glint tapped his claws against a tool bag, waiting for the answer. Fern simply held his gaze, her amber eyes calm and sure. Arden smiled. "We're in," he told Rios. Their first mission took them back into the belt. A family of Martian sandcats had been left behind when their owner's ship was impounded. Kiln carried the smallest kittens gently in his mouth, careful as if they were glass. Glint worked quietly to calm the older ones, using soft sounds and steady eyes. Fern guarded the bay door, her body a wall between the frightened animals and the cold. It was hard work, but when they returned to Europa, the settlers cheered them as heroes. Not every rescue was joyful. Some came too late. But for every loss, there were many lives saved, and the bond between captain and dragons grew stronger. The Wayfarer earned a new name across the outer systems. People called it the Dragon's Hope, a ship that brought safety where there was none. Months passed, and then came a mission that would change everything again. Drifting near the same sector where Arden had first found Fern, Kiln, and Glint, the scanners picked up a faint life signature. Inside a failing station, they discovered 5 dragon eggs, glowing softly within a collapsing stasis field. Fern made a sound Arden had never heard before, low and deep, filled with memory. Kiln rushed forward, chirping with excitement. Glint studied the controls, extending the failing field just long enough for Arden to move the eggs. Back on Europa, the entire settlement came together to build a nursery. Under the shielded dome, lamps glowed warm. Weeks later, as a storm of Jupiter's radiation painted the sky in sheets of green and gold, the eggs hatched. 2 silver dragons blinked at the world. One deep purple stretched small wings. A pearl white chirped and toppled into Kiln's waiting claws. A black hatchling yawned, then squeaked with startling boldness. Fern watched over them like a true guardian. Kiln played tirelessly, matching their energy with his own. Glint taught them small puzzles, guiding their tiny claws with patient clicks. Arden stood in the corner, watching the chaos and realizing he had found more than companions. He had found a purpose. One evening, as Jupiter's storms boiled overhead, Arden sat with the dragons sprawled around him. Fern rested her head near his shoulder. Kiln pressed against his boots. Glint leaned quietly at his side. The hatchlings tumbled nearby, their chirps echoing through the dome. Arden spoke softly, his words steady for the log. "A year ago, I thought I was rescuing 3 small lives, but the truth is, they were rescuing me. They gave me family, they gave me hope, and they gave me a reason to keep flying." A siren cut the calm, an icequake warning. Fern rose at once, wings wide, her warning cry blending with the alarm. Kiln bounced with restless courage. Glint grabbed straps and blankets, ready to help. Arden stood with them, his voice steady. "All right, team, let's go to work." They moved together into the night, not as pilot and cargo, but as family and crew. The cost of compassion had been high, but the reward was greater than Arden ever imagined. He had lost a career, but he had gained a future. Under the endless skies of Europa, Captain Arden Hale and his dragons had made a vow to keep choosing life again and again, no matter the price.